Okay, should we start? Hi, good evening. My name's Cathy Mager, and I've been working with Kristina Veasey for 2 years now. Till recently, I was the director, program manager for the Forest of Dean Sculpture Trust, and we worked in partnership with Unlimited to commission Kristina. And we also have Naomi Byrne here as well. Let us know if you can't see her. She's our British Sign Language interpreter for the night. I'm signing a little bit, but watch Naomi for full access. And we also have Kristina Veasey as well. Do you want to introduce yourself quickly, Kristina?
Yeah, I'm Kristina Veasey. I'm a visual artist and looking forward to spending some time with you and sharing my work with you.
Okay, so tonight what's going to happen is we will show Kristina's fantastic film, and which will be about 4 minutes long. And then after that, we'll come back to Kristina and I having an in-conversation chat, reflecting on the work she's been doing in the Forest of Dean. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start asking Kristina some questions about her work with in the Forest of Dean as well as the film. And I thought it'd be really nice to go back to 2019 when you first arrived in the forest, a very different environment for you, a very new place, and what your expectations were and what actually happened then, and what your impressions were of the sculpture trail and what went on in those first few weeks and months in the Forest of Dean.
Yeah, well, like you say, it is a really different place for me. I live in the South Downs and all the hills are very bald. There's no trees on them. They're beautiful and, you know, very, very particular to this area. And then when I travelled to the Forest of Dean, you've got a lot of hills absolutely covered in trees. You can stand, you know, halfway up one of the hills and be looking down on treetops while still seeing trees towering above you, and it's really lush and verdant, so very, very different. And of course there's an amazing rich heritage as well, because it's a working forest going back hundreds of years. It's got very ancient oaks in it that were grown for the masts of ships, and it's got mines underneath that now sadly are no longer viable, but mining of coal and iron and ochre. There's quarrying going on, so it's a very sort of a working environment, which obviously has an impact on the people that live in the area as well, or certainly did until the mines closed. So that was a big change. And it's also home to lots of rare fauna and flora as well. There's sort of horseshoe bats that live there that are protected, all sorts of little beetles and plants that need to have forest management around them to keep them in balance with the whole ecosystem. So it was a really different place, a really rich place, and lots of things to investigate and find out about. It's also a relatively inaccessible place for someone using a wheelchair as well. So that was probably one of the first impressions that I had, was that it was very difficult to get up the paths in the sculpture trail. Obviously with a lot of landscapes, that's just the way things are. You can't navigate everything. But we were creative around that and found ways to explore using borrowed trampers, which are like a big off-road mobility scooter, and using Forestry Commission vehicles to get me to different parts to explore it properly. So quite a different place, and so much to draw from for my work. It was hard to know where to start, really. It could be a bit overwhelming because there was so much of it, and being pulled in all sorts of different directions. But it was quite interesting because I started this project with a view to doing something with baskets, and using baskets as a metaphor for the way that people weave around barriers in life and find new paths. And so I'd hoped to find this reflected in the natural environment of the forest as well, which I did, with you know, roots searching for water and saplings reaching for the sun. So there was that idea of baskets and basket weaving at the beginning, but then I got pulled into all the heritage stuff, and that was really interesting. And then it struck me that the stories that I was hearing all came from the same perspective. They all came from a white male and non-disabled kind of viewpoint, because it was set around recording the activities that happened in the forest, which were largely male orientated. And so in the oral histories I was listening to, and in the books that I was reading, and in the people that I spoke to, and historians that shared stories with me, it largely centered around a male narrative. And I thought, where are all the women? And where are all the voices of disabled people and other people from marginalised groups? Because I know they live here. Where are they? So I kind of got pulled in that direction, and that, again, that tied in really well with the baskets narrative and looking to overcome barriers and wend new paths. So then I returned back to the idea of doing something with baskets.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I remember all of this, and it was really exciting as it all started coming out. And I knew immediately you were going to start asking really different questions to the artists that have come before you, and I was really interested to see where it was going to lead. I think one thing that was really powerful for me as a deaf curator was bringing a disabled artist into the forest, knowing that we were not fully inclusive as an environment to the space, and that normally being the barrier, like, we're not accessible, keep the door shut, you know. But instead, we flung it open, and we decided to just see what we could do and how we could achieve to look at inclusion at a very broad sense, a multi-layered sense, rather than a rule book. You need a path that's that gradient. It needs to be that material. We couldn't do that. So I'm really glad, and I hope that this means that other land agents, other outdoor setting historic buildings keep an open mind about how they can include and commission disabled artists in their context, even if they have restricted access created by historical or natural barriers. So next, after this, some really interesting things started being made that were not baskets. And I'd really love for you to share a little bit about the creative experiments that you had through the course of the residency.
Yeah, well, it was interesting for me, because obviously when you're going through the forest and you've got all these natural materials and resources around you, and it's almost like the forest is offering you things, whether it's a twig or some leaves or bark, and so I wanted to use those in my work, but I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with them. So I just started playing around with the materials, and whilst I was doing that, I was deep in thought about the stories that I'd heard, the people that I'd spoken to, and the heritage in the area. And things just started emerging, different sort of wooden structures, and yeah, different shapes, different processes, different techniques. I had a whole thing using sheep's fleece, and going through the different processes of scouring and skirting and carding and spinning, and learning all these different techniques. And I didn't have like a set idea of what I was going to do with them at the end. I've still got a big box of fleeces that Roger Deeks kindly sent me in my conservatory studio, that I do plan to do something with at some point, but I'm not quite sure what. But I have used some of that spun wool in the video that you just saw, and that's what's binding the branches together on the basket. And that's wool from a Welsh black mountain sheep, I think. Yeah, so I kind of let the materials lead me. And that was really nice, because when you know, the things I've done in the past have been largely sort of installation based and digital art, and you're not really getting messy with the materials, and this allowed me to get messy with the materials and just feeling like how fibrous the wood was, or how bendy something was, and how pliable it was, and the different sort of techniques that changed the properties of things. So I was using a process called shusujiban, which is a Japanese technique of charring wood to preserve it and make it more resilient. And it burns out all the sap in it, so the insects have nothing to feed on. So it waterproofs it and fireproofs it as well. But in doing that, and just watching the wood changing colour as I was using the blowtorch, and seeing it going darker, seeing things peel off it, just really observing it was a whole sort of meditative process. And I was doing that at home, hundreds of miles away from the Forest of Dean. So I was still having that real connection with the forest, even though I was so far away, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, fantastic. It was that I had envy from all the creative work you were doing. It was just really exciting, fascinating, and all the collaborations you were having with the local artists and specialists.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, I don't want to not mention this, because this was one of the highlights for me, was the session that I did with a local artist, Lizzie Godden, who works with textiles and natural dyes, and she showed me how to use and how to create dyes from things like buddleia and natural plants to dye the sheep's fleece. So it's like another added layer of the forest within the artwork, was bringing these vibrant colours into play as well.
Yeah, it was really wonderful to see all these colours and textures and variety coming out. What was the most powerful part for me of your work with your such authentic, investigation of the human history of the forest in its many forms, and of the contemporary day, the people that live there. It'd be really wonderful for you to share the process of seeking out those voices and meeting and exchanging their stories, and how that manifested in the film we've just seen. Working with a brass band in lockdown, to the sheep badgers, to the Black Lives Matter activists. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I met quite a lot of different people in all sorts of different roles during my R&D, from the Deputy Gaveller, who is someone who is in charge of all the different mine seams and shafts, and has some amazing big old maps that show you how miners used to walk for 2 hours underground just to get to their shaft to start their shift. And I spoke to historians at the Heritage Centre. I spoke to travellers. I spoke to the phenomenal young woman who set up the Black Lives Matters event in Bathurst Park, and that was quite an interesting time, because obviously, everybody knows about all the sort of protests and horrible stuff that went on with that, and she received a lot of abuse at that time, and it was quite interesting to see how somebody from a marginalised group growing up in a predominantly white area was able to find her voice and speak out, and also to pull people locally together to stand with her, and to fight against things like the council trying to shut down the event, and just seeing that sort of level of resilience. I just thought, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, and I spoke to people who recall stories of old. So somebody who remembers his grandfather telling him how he managed to shoot off his arm by accident and had to be carried on the back of a cart to Monmouth Hospital. And then the local ostler made him a prosthetic arm so that he could continue working. Wasn't able to go back down the mines, had to work in a mill instead. But again, you know, another sort of story of resilience, and stories about how people relate to the area, how they use the area, that sort of hold hands through the generations. So reading stories of people long ago who used to roll on their side down the hills, getting faster and faster, and exploring the hidden wells and bathing in them. And I spoke to a group of young people at the Arts Centre, and they had the same stories. Years later, people were still enjoying the area in the same way, which was great.
Yeah, so it's wonderful. So what happened after that when you met with these people? How did it come together in the film? Did everyone agree to be documented for the film?
Well, so obviously it coincided with lockdown as well, and I was unable to get to the forest during that time, and I wanted to collect some of those voices to use in the film. And I realised quite quickly, having done a survey, online survey, and I infiltrated all the local Facebook groups for the Forest of Dean area as well, and got local people to fill it in. But I realised that those written testimonies, to be in the film, we're going to have someone narrating them, and to have someone without a local accent was just not going to fit. And it sort of felt like I'd be stealing their words or something. So I wanted to have local people narrating. So I called on Roger Deeks, who's been incredibly supportive throughout the whole project, and he commandeered the Forest of Dean brass band to do the narrating for me. And it was so lovely as well, because the recordings came through, and I hadn't been to the forest for a while, and I'd been isolated and stuck in lockdown. And then when I pressed play and I heard really strong accent and all these voices coming out of my computer, it was great. I was just transported back again. It really brings it alive, I think.
And yeah, it was wonderful. I was really excited about you working with the brass band, because I've always wanted a brass band to perform on the sculpture trail at our launches, and I didn't quite manage it. So I'm hoping for your launch, that we're hoping to come soon on the sculpture trail itself. We'll be able to get that brass band I've always dreamed of performing. But yeah, it was wonderful that you were able to work collaboratively with them, even though you were you know, living in isolation through lockdown. I think it was really fascinating to see how the pandemic, but also your own health circumstances, influenced the course of work and the things that came out of it. You made another film with us during lockdown. Could you share a little bit about what happened with the whole pandemic impact on the project?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, not being able to get to the forest kind of scuppered a lot of things. I'd been hoping to share some of the baskets that I'd made through the R&D in a live kind of exhibition, and that very quickly sort of bit the dust, really. But at the same time, I had an accident as well, which left me laid up in bed for several months. And I was trying to connect with the forest at that time as well, and sort of had all bits of sheep's wool and sticks and everything all over my bed. I was weaving away and trying to whittle things in the bed, and every time my legs would spasm, everything was flying everywhere. And yeah, resembling a forest floor all over my duvet. Yeah, so that had a big impact. I couldn't get back to the forest. I was trying to continue doing stuff here. And And I've forgotten what I was going to say. You'll have to remind me.
You were talking about the forest floor being over your bedroom, and then I've just looked at the transcript.
Sorry, this is the thing of having an ongoing health condition. It's my concentration just suddenly switches off all by itself.
Yeah, so you were saying that your bedroom was resembling the forest floor, and that had a big impact.
That's right.
You couldn't get back to the forest, and
yes, and so the Sculpture Trust asked me to make a video about how I was working during this lockdown time, and I went through all the things that I'd recorded during my time in the forest, and one of them was a track of birdsong that I'd recorded right in the centre of the forest. And for somebody with access issues, it's quite difficult to get in a forest anyway, and it's actually something that I'd never done before alone, actually going into a forest. And I had expected it to be really quiet, because I thought there'll be no one around, there'll be no cars or anything, it's going to be silent. And it was so noisy, all these birds like calling to each other. I was really taken by surprise, so I recorded it. So I was listening to it in my bed, and just sort of trying to do a sort of virtual forest bathing, and just listening to the bird song and thinking about the sort of dampness of the leaves underfoot and the rustling of the leaves in the trees, and being transported. Yeah, and that I suppose that whole forest bathing thing, and that being present and taking time out of our busy lives is a really kind of key thing for me. And I wanted to have that in some work made as a result of this R&D. So that also led me on to creating a sculptural bench, which at the moment is in the design stage, and we're looking at getting the planning permission for that. And that's going to be made with steam bent oak, and it sort of mirrors the winding River Wye, and also the winding of the chutes and the winding of people navigating barriers in their lives, but offers a place for people to contemplate and take stock and notice the forest around them.
Yeah, I am really excited about the bench. We don't know when it'll be installed, because that process can be very long and like unpredictable. But hopefully it will be coming soon, and we'll be on the trail for a while, so there'll be an opportunity for people to come and see it in their many hundreds of thousands. There is an opportunity to see the film that Kristina made during lockdown. It was part of a commission that we also did with Alex Finlay, who is an artist who lives with ME and long COVID. And he explores how to walk with not walking. So other people take walks for him during lockdown, so that he could experience nature and places without actually leaving his home. But you could see those on the Forest of Dean Sculpture Trust website. I'll put the link in the chat in a minute. So there's another very important reason why we're here today, is because you're launching your new website. So tell us all about this fantastic new website you've been working on.
Yeah, so it's quite a substantial website, it turns out. I thought I was going to whittle down my work and just show a select few items, but it turns out I'm not as good at whittling down as I thought I might be. I was funded to create some new baskets, which are inspired by people's experiences during lockdown, and it sort of mixes up little insights about what's happened during lockdown and how people handled lockdown, with baskets that are made from things like mobile phone charging wires and electric fence wires and fragile tape, and just those sort of things that are really kind of key within lockdown for keeping us all connected. So again, those sort of barriers that we're all facing because of the COVID pandemic and the way that we're trying to navigate them and weave our way through them. Yeah, so there's, and that's a sort of more playful kind of section of the website. There's a lot of sort of me interacting with the baskets in little videos, and it's very colourful. So yeah, that's there to explore as well.
Yeah, wonderful. I'm looking forward to exploring your website more. Kristina, have we covered everything, or do you feel there's anything else you'd like to add before we invite questions?
Oh, maybe just to thank the people that have funded and commissioned and supported and yeah, helped me through the whole R&D process, really. So sort of Unlimited, Sculpture Trust, yourself, Camilla, my producer, Matt Nightingale, Roger Deeks, and all the individual people that I spoke to as well. So yeah, just can't do it without that sort of social engagement and support, really. So really appreciate it.
Fantastic, thank you, Kristina. We're now going to open it up for questions from anybody watching right now. If you'd like to put a question in the chat, and then we can carry that over to Kristina. While we're waiting for any questions, I've got one for you, Kristina. What else are you doing right now? I'm just being nosy. What other work are you? I know you're always working on many things, but I'm interested to know what's happening elsewhere in your practice.
Yeah, well, I'm just about to start a commission with the Paralympic Heritage. I'm going to get the name wrong now. Fiona, maybe you can help me. The Paralympic Heritage Trust, possibly, working with schools in the area around Stoke Mandeville, and that's hopefully looking at creating some sort of sculptural piece for a sculptural garden, which will be made by Year 6 children for, I think, Year 3 children to enjoy, and being inspired by some of the heritage of the Paralympic Games, which some people may or may not know. I was a Paralympic athlete myself, so I have a fondness for the Paralympics and the stories that come out of there as well. So I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, I think we've got some questions coming in now. So that Paralympic project sounds fascinating. I'm looking forward to seeing it. So we've got a question from Ellie. Hi Kristina, great to be here. I would like to know more about the colourful ribbons of text in the basket in the video, and what they say and how the words were collected.
Yeah, so those are the words that came back through the surveys that I did, asking people a whole host of questions about favourite things in the area, what they thought was important about their heritage or not, how they found living there, and also from Zoom conversations that I had through lockdown with individual people, and also just from notes that I wrote when I was interviewing people throughout the R&D. So then I transcribed those onto the computer and printed them out into tissue paper, and then they've been cut up into confetti strips, loaded into the confetti cannon, and then fired out of the basket. And what I really like with that is that I really wanted to give a voice to the more marginalised stories and people from the forest, and well, not give a voice, they've got a voice, but to really explode those voices so that they could be heard and celebrated. And You know, a lot of my work involves colour usually, and I'd found through the R&D process that I'd kind of reflected a lot of the colours from the forest, which were like more muted tones like ochres and the black of the charcoal and the orange of the iron. And I sort of thought, yeah, where's me in this? Because me comes with colour usually. And so I thought this is great because the confetti is colourful and it's joyous and it's celebratory and it's going to burst out of the confines of this basket and yeah, just really bring it alive. So yeah, so that's how they came about. And I like the images that I got afterwards with them draped over the edges of the edges of the basket as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. We've got another question. It would have been so easy to have said no, the forest is not accessible. How did both of you know to keep pushing? Interesting one.
Sorry, what was the question?
From Joe, it would have been so easy to have said no, the forest is not accessible. And so how did both of you know how to keep pushing?
Yeah, well, I think both of us have had to push for good access our whole lives. So it's kind of the natural path is to keep pushing, although it's exhausting a lot of the time. But I think also there's a drive to not just to be able to access something for yourself, but to pave the way for other people to be able to access it too. And it was a lot of trial and error. Cathy, I know you had tried before to try and have a sort of higher service for mobility scooters for trampers in the forest, and that was quite problematic. And you know, some things are insurmountable, and you just have to try and weave around those and find new paths.
Yeah, I think I tried to be completely transparent with Kristina. So I said, this isn't good enough, this isn't working, I would want to do more. But I was very laid it all out, so hopefully in quite a transparent way, with a lot of honesty about what was working, what wasn't working, and that we had wanted to have a tramp and mobility scheme, but because we're off-grid in a lot of ways, there are things, there are limitations and challenges around that. Just to mention, they are hoping to introduce a new mobility scooter scheme in the near future, having been able to get investment to resolve all those off-grid problems linked to power and so on, and resources to make that work. I do think it comes from a collaboration between two people who've got a lived experience of disability and know how to think outside of the box and outside of the rule book. Right. Somebody from Vicky's asked, fantastic work, Kristina, amazing to see how your work has developed. Has this given you further ideas?
Yeah, I have lots of ideas all the time. It's trying to be selective about them that's the problem. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is there's so many sort of different directions I could shoot off in just from this one area. You know, whether it's using this big box of wool to create a tapestry, or felting, or you know, spinning and creating something, or whether it's moving into more sort of big sculptural pieces, or more socially engaged kind of experiences. Yeah, I mean, I had an idea that I still sort of am holding here around taking the forest to other people who can't get out to the forest in some way. And also, there's a lot of places that I would like to access that I currently can't. And I just think there's always a way somehow. Sometimes it takes money or people to try and help that happen. But there's certainly places that I think it would be nice to experience And I think one of the things with having done this R&D is, and what Cathy was saying earlier about bringing disabled people into usually inaccessible environments, is they come with a different lived experience and a different way of looking at things. So the insights you get are very different, because they're coming from a different perspective. And I think it would be interesting to see what do people who don't have good mobility feel about, I don't know, being at the top of Ben Nevis, or in the middle of a sand dune, or, you know, somewhere where you can't normally get to, and just, you know, even like that whole thing of hearing the birds in the middle of the forest when I thought it was going to be quiet. It's quite, you know, it was quite revelatory for me. So what would it be like to go somewhere else where I've got no idea what it would be like till I got there? And maybe those things are things that other people take for granted because they can access them really easily. So quite interested in that kind of work. But at the moment, mainly focusing out of this project on the bench sculpture. And I'm quite looking forward to doing some steam bending with Charlie Winnie, who has a workshop up in the Lake District. So yeah, looking forward to that as well.
You've got quite a few questions to go. How much time have we got left? Are we aiming to finish at what time?
7.
7. Okay. Well, we've got quite a few.
You have to be selective. I can't actually see the questions because my screen is still frozen. So
I might pick them. Somebody's asking about the name of the wood burning technique. That's a quick one to answer.
Yeah, that's Suji Ban.
Could you spell that?
Yeah, it's SHOU and then SUGI and then BAN.
Wow.
Okay. So the comments, I love the idea of the forest on the bedroom floor. I want to go and make one myself. Helen Cole, this is from Helen Cole. Thank you both, Kristina and Cathy. Can you make more of these? Well, that's lovely. Not a question, but praise. A question from Rivka, who says, was there ever a time when you weren't able to think of a way through the barriers? I'm just wondering whether there is a natural talent to see them but be resilient and creative with them, or whether there are things that have been made possible over the years. I would like to add that your particular way in seeing and being is very inspiring.
Thank you, Rivka. I'm quite a fix-it person. I like to find out why things aren't working and then try and find out how to repair them or make them work. So although I can find like the emotional side of inaccessibility quite draining, I can also look at it quite pragmatically and look for practical solutions as well. So yeah, that's kind of how I approach it.
I've done a project recently with young carers in the forest. So there were a lot of barriers there because they are responsible for the care of people living in their homes, and they're very young, aged 10, 11, 12. So that was a huge barrier. So we created a network of partners and a system so that they could come into the forest on Wednesday evenings after school or in the workshop. So a bit of trial and error, but commitment and, you know, partnerships can make some amazing things happen, even with people who are, you know, really marginalised by their circumstances. So I'm just going to go for the next question. Where are we? Sorry. From Matt. Do you think any of the varied techniques you have learned, experimented through the R&D, will be ones you will take forward into future works?
Possibly. I don't know, I tend to sort of be led by an idea, like a theme of a project or an issue that I want to address or something that I want to highlight, and then find the best way of conveying that, rather than being led by the processes or the materials. So I guess it would depend whether it lent itself well to what I was trying to do. And having said that, I've got baskets full of wool everywhere because I'm still felting things and spinning things just sort of in front of the telly at night, because I don't like to sit still. So some things definitely are there to play around with and explore, and maybe something will come of that as well.
I've missed one. I missed a question from, is it Mackenzie, who says, what do you do with all of the things that you create? Have you got a very big cupboard at home? No, I've added that last bit in myself.
Yeah, I have a very full house, and yeah, I've got a giant basket just the other side of the wall next to me, and that's taking up the entire dining room table. Yeah, so there's things everywhere in the house generally, and furniture from the last project I did, My Dirty Secret, is everywhere, and yeah, it's very crowded in here.
There's lots of lovely praiseful comments on the chat. I don't know if you want me to read them out. Would that be good?
Well, I can't see them, so
Okay,
yeah, that'd be nice.
There's Roger D, Kristina, brilliant work. Comment, a wide range of people in the forest engaged with helping your creative process. Partly an outcome of the circumstances, and this moves them away from the traditional tropes and how they see themselves. It helps to change the narrative and will make the forest a more inclusive and diverse place. Thank you and the Sculpture Trail for commissioning this. Oh, Cathy, sorry you are leaving the Sculpture Trust, but this is a great legacy. Oh, that's lovely. I think. Yeah, there's some people having to leave early, but they've said they've really enjoyed it.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I think that's everything. I'm sorry if I've missed everything out. This is my first time being the host, so I may have missed a couple of comments, but I think we've had some really warm feedback this evening. I think we're wrapping it up now, unless you'd like to add any final comments, Kristina, or anything you want.
No, just say thank you to everybody for joining us, and Cathy, to you for hosting, and to Naomi for the interpretation, and yeah, to all the support that we've had from Unlimited as well, which has been great, and always is great. And yeah, I've really enjoyed doing this project, and I've really become very fond of the Forest of Dean as well, and we've even just returned from our summer holiday there with family. So I think there's a whole host of people that we've sort of spread this fondness onto as well. So yeah, it's been really enjoyable. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kristina. You've been amazing to work with, incredible artist to work with. So really moving to be able to do this with you at the end of my time with the Sculpture Trust. There's more to come from Kristina, so keep a lookout on the Forest of Dean Sculpture Trust website and social media accounts, because we'll have news coming soon of what's happening next with Kristina's amazing sculptural bench. So thank you everybody for coming. It's been a wonderful evening.
Yeah, thank you.